and welcome to the Art of Being Human. On the last segment, we dealt with Sheldon's body type, so I have two more that I want to do, and I want you to realize that this is kind of lighter. I think we need a couple of lighter shows. I've been dealing with a lot of heavy stuff as we've been talking about depression and so forth, especially during this pandemic. So there is another theory, though, that came out years ago by a person his last name was Jung, and he was a psychoanalyst. Now, he was a very famous psychoanalyst, and he had a theory of body type. He had something called the introvert-extrovert theory, and he was a Swiss psychiatrist, I guess. His name is Carl Jung, and this is what he considered people to be. If you look at the chart, I'll have a little chart here that I want to show you. The introverts and the extroverts. There are two different types of types. So this is not so much body type, but personality type. Introverts and extroverts. And then put them on a curve, and if you go to the extremes, you have a very highly introverted people over here, highly extroverted people over here. And so therefore, it's kind of like a range, and there is a middle point in here. But here again, we cannot judge people's personality based upon whether they're introverts or whether they're extroverts. And the reason that I feel that we can't do that, even though this is the theory, is the fact that so many things happen to us. There is what's known as a nature-nurture conflict. How much of you as a person is based upon what you've inherited, and how much of you is based upon what you've learned? Now, you have to agree that people learn what they live. If a child is growing up and they're in a very healthy environment and their parents are good parents and they take them places and they do things with them. I know when I was a college professor, I talked to one of my students. She was an adult student, and she had a family. She had 2 or 3 children, and we were discussing child raising. And she says, I never have any problem with my kids. I never have had any problem with my kids. They're never in any trouble. And I said, well, how do you manage that? And she says, we keep them busy. We go on lots of trips together as a family. We see lots of different things. We go to zoos. We go to art museums. We go to, and she's describing all these things. We travel a lot. We see different places. We make life so interesting that it's not necessary for kids to be in any trouble. They find life fascinating. They're learning new things. And I had another friend of mine who I liked very much, and she was an excellent mother. Her kids never got into any trouble either. And she was raising them in places like Chicago and Los Angeles, in bigger cities. I says, you must like bigger cities. She says, no, I don't. I don't trust bigger cities. There's lots of crime, there's lots of this, there's lots of that. But when I raised my kids, I had them very busy. There were music lessons, there's art lessons, there's dancing lessons, there's Girl Scouts, there's Boy Scouts, there's all kinds of clubs. And I was with them. I did not leave them. I never left them to their own devices. I always was with them. I went with them to their lessons. I went with them to their shows. I went with them to their games. And so therefore I was very, very involved. And in becoming involved with them, they never got into any trouble. They never were arrested by the police. They never used drugs. I was with them all the time. So she spent an enormous amount of time. She says, in a bigger city, there's lots of things that kids can do that are healthy. You just have to search it out and find it. And when you find it, you bring them, you stay with them, and then they're okay. And I'm thinking, what a wonderful mom she was. You know, she took care of her children in the best way that she knew how to do it. And she had her own difficulties. She had learning disabilities and so forth. Some people didn't consider her to be extremely bright. I thought she was very bright. You know, a person with a learning disability may not appear to be bright. They might have trouble reading or writing or whatever the thing is. But it doesn't mean that their innate intelligence isn't there. And as I explained to her, Einstein had trouble reading. He was so involved with mathematics. He was so involved in mathematical theory. He was really a genius. But put him in a class and have him read, he didn't speak or read until he was fairly old. And everyone considered him to be retarded because he couldn't read and he couldn't speak well. Well, that's because his brain was somewhere else, you know? And the problem with theories is that you have to account for the fact of where a person is, what their life space is. So Jung, who was the Swiss psychiatrist, had two types of people, introverts and extroverts. They weren't based so much on body type as basically personality structure. And so what the difference is this. An introvert is a person who is self-centered and shy. The characteristics of introvert: their feelings are hurt easily, they daydream a lot, they blush a lot, they stay in the background, they are stage fright, they're reluctant to make friends, especially friends of the other sex. They worry over misfortune. It's hard for them to make decisions. They're critical of other people. They're concerned over gossip. They take care of personal property, and they respond to praise. Now, does that really describe an introverted person? I don't, you know, to me, it goes far afield, but it may be right. That's according to him. Now, you've got to remember there's a cultural aspect to this, too. He lived many, many years ago, and he was a psychiatrist many, many years ago. Society was different then. They didn't have electronics. They didn't have the internet. You know, and so therefore he had to base his assumptions on what was culturally acceptable and not acceptable at that time. As culture changes, personalities change with it. Excuse me while I take a drink. It's allergy season. So I don't know as this is all replicable today. I don't know as we can say that today introverts are more worried about decisions or harder to make decisions, or they're more critical of other people, but they take care of their personal property. Well, who doesn't? And so it goes, stage fright, staying in the background. I can see some of it for an introverted person. An introverted person probably does feel hurt more easily because they're not out there. You know, they more to themselves. Now, it's perfectly normal. If a person is introverted, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. That's just their personality structure. They stay to themselves more. They are more in tune with what their bodies are. Now, daydreaming a lot, blushing a lot, stage fright, who knows about that? Maybe yes, maybe no. I could see the stage fright if they are more to themselves than extroverted people. Maybe they do become more afraid if they're on stage. Worrying about misfortune, I think that's an equal opportunity employer. I think a lot of people do that. Harder to make decisions, I don't know if that's the case. I would want to argue that a little. Being critical of other people, I don't know if that's the case either. My friends of mine who are more introverted, they don't complain about other people. They don't criticize other people. They're not gossipers, you know, and whatever happens to them, they hold on to it, they work with it, they deal with it. So I don't think this is completely true. They do respond to praise, but so do extroverts respond to praise. You know, everybody responds to praise. Taking care of personal property, I don't know if it has any relevance to whether you're introverted or whether you're extroverted. But those are the characters of introversion as he saw them in that day and age. I'm going to read over it again. Feelings hurt easily, daydream a lot, blush a lot, stay in the background, which I can understand that would be true of an introverted person. Stage fright, I can see that too. Reluctance to make friends, so-so. Worry over misfortune, I think that everybody does. Hard to make decisions. I don't think it's any more difficult for them to make decisions as anybody else. Critical of others, maybe not true. Concern over gossip, I don't know as they think about it. Taking care of personal property, everybody does. And responding to praise, it's something that everybody does. Excuse me, once again. Now, what are the excuse me? What are the characteristics of being an extrovert? It says some of them are the same. The feelings are hurt easily. They seldom daydream. They make friends easily. I can see that. They're the life of the party. They don't worry much. I don't know about that one. They laugh easily. They like doing oral reports rather than written ones. They accept orders from others. They have paperwork that they do with social contacts rather than with confining detail. They have no self-pity, and they're a good loser. So let's go over that a little bit. What is an extrovert? An extrovert is more outgoing. They get involved with people. They make themselves known more. Extroverts are more socially adaptable. They don't stay to themselves. So these characteristics of extroversion, is that typical of people who are really extroverts? If you look at your friends and you look at your family, some of them will be introverts, some of them will be extroverts. You would maybe make a decision as to who was what, depending upon how they respond to people. An introvert will stay more to themselves. They're not so much into people. They're not so much socially irrelevant. They stay more to themselves. An extrovert goes out more. They like people. They like meeting people. They like being in the public eye. And so that would be an extrovert. But are all of these characteristics typical? Remember, Carl Jung lived in a very, very early age, and as a Swiss psychiatrist, he had to base his decisions based upon what he saw. And most of them, as a psychiatrist, would have been from people that he treated. People who had psychiatric illnesses went to psychoanalysts, they went to psychiatrists, and so therefore in that day and age there was an emphasis upon remembering everything that happened to you. If you talk about Freud as a psychoanalyst, what he wanted to do is to get people to remember everything that happened to them, and that would explain their illnesses. But they didn't have medications like we do today, and they didn't have behavioral types of procedures that you can use for therapy as we do today. It was analysis, analysis, analysis. And I know in some of those analytic days, people would go to an analyst like 5 or 6 times a week. They would lay on the couch. The analyst would sit behind them, so they couldn't see his face, because they wanted them to remember things and talk about them without seeing the expressions on the face of the therapist, because that might change what they say, and they wanted to have it totally come from the individual person. So they would usually sit in a position and guide them, but not so that you would see their face. Now today in psychotherapy things are different. People face each other and they talk to one another, and there's an interchange between them. Now there are different types of therapies. There's Rogerian and there's eclectic, and there's all kinds of therapies. I was trained in Rogerian. And I find that no matter what type of therapy a psychologist uses or a counselor uses, the fact is, if they're really interested in helping the person, a person can get better no matter what theory the counselor is working with. If I have a theory that I'm a Rogerian and I do Rogerian counseling, so sometimes I don't do Rogerian counseling. Sometimes I'm more eclectic. But if I am talking to a person and I'm interested in them, and if I wasn't interested, I wouldn't have them in my office to begin with, then no matter what theory I operate from, they're going to get better because you're uplifting them, you're helping them, and whatever their framework is, as a psychologist or as a counselor, it's going to work because you're helping the person and they know it. They know when they're being helped. They know when you're interested in them. They know when you want the best for them. And so therefore, if I use Rogerian, or if I use a more eclectic type, or if I use a more psychoanalytic type, which I generally don't do, it takes too long, then you're going to get improvement in the person. So let me read over these again. Their feelings are hurt. This is extroversion. Their feelings are hurt easily. They seldom daydream. They make friends easily. They're the life of the party. They don't worry much. They laugh easily. They like doing oral reports rather than written ones. They accept orders from others. They like to have paperwork. They prefer work with social contacts rather than confining detail and paperwork. They have no self-pity, and they're a good loser. Well, the feelings hurt easily, I can see that, because if you're out in the public and then people start going against you, that can be embarrassing and difficult. Daydreaming, I'm not sure about that one. Making friends easily, that seems to fit. Being the life of the party, if they're an extrovert, that seems to fit. Not worrying much, I'm not sure. I think in this day and age with pandemics that they can actually worry as much as anybody else. Laughing easily, I can see that. Liking doing oral reports rather than written ones, and I can see that as well. Accepting orders, well, I mean, either way, whether you're introvert or extrovert, I don't see that there's any difference there. They prefer work with social contacts rather than confining detail. I can see that. No self-pity, I'm not sure about that one. Being a good loser, who knows? I mean, I don't see there's any way to verify that. So that is interesting in itself. Now, one came out, and it's just, every so often you get a magazine article. This magazine article was how you can rate your personality and what kind of a personality you have based upon how you eat pizza. I couldn't believe it, but I decided to bring it in. Pizza is popular, and according to the theories in this magazine article, there are 4 or 5 eating styles. One is called an influencer, one is called a careful connector, one is called a supporter, one a driver, and 5 a classicist. What are the differences in these personality types based upon how you eat pizza? I mean, take it for what it's worth. The influencer eats the crust first, and their characteristics are that they set trends, they're independent, and they like to try new things. How can you verify that? Well, I think you'd have to go into a psychological study of the person who's eating the pizza, and do a psychological study on them. The careful connector, they eat pizza with a knife and a fork. They're neat, they're meticulous, they solve problems, they analyze, and they're perfectionists. And maybe a little bit, if you're going to eat pizza with a knife and a fork, you can be precise, you can do everything carefully, and maybe you're analytical. I don't put too much stock in it. The supporter sometimes fold their pizza. They vary in the way that they eat pizza. And because of that, they're creative, they're a free spirit, they're very sociable, and they want everyone to have pizza before they take theirs. They're very fair-minded. Everyone gets pizza. The driver, which is the next one, they fold pizza. They don't waste time on eating it. They take charge. They're strong. they're confident, they make quick decisions and they stand by them, and they're a leader. That's because they fold their pizza when they eat it rather than doing it with a knife and fork or eating it with a crust first or whatever. The classicists pick it up and eat it in a traditional way. They like plain pizza, they like traditional taste, they're straightforward, and they have a simple elegance to them. So that's that for that kind of pizza. And you know, wherever you read a magazine article, someone's going to come out with an article about how you do something and how it relates to your personality. I saw one, I didn't bring it in, what kind of dog you have. That denotes what kind of personality you have. And it goes far afield. And somebody's always writing something as a theorist about how you can show who you are and what you are according to how you do something, body type or personality, or the way you eat pizza, or the way you choose your dog, and also the way you choose your car color. I've seen that as well, and I thought that was pretty. You know, if you buy a car and you can afford a new car, maybe you could choose the color, and the color that you choose can show what kind of personality you are. But most people who can't afford a new car, they have to buy a used car. They have to take what color it happens to come in, you know. I know I have a black car, and that's fine for me. I like the color black, but I didn't necessarily choose it black. It was available, it's what I wanted it, and it came in black, so I took black, you know? And my mother was saying, why didn't you get another color? I says, for what I wanted, this was the best choice. So at any rate, you kind of take it as it comes, and if it fits you, then maybe you can adapt it to your life, maybe you can. But I'm not going to go any further with that. Next time, we're going to talk about disappointments and how to handle disappointments. We're coming, I think, close to the end, not the end of the pandemic, but it's more in control. Things are beginning to open up, so I want to kind of loosen things up and not do so much heavy stuff as I was doing before. So at any rate, I'm going to close it here. We'll be dealing with disappointments. How do you handle disappointments? Well, how can you help yourself if you are disappointed? Where did disappointments come from, and where can you go with it? So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.